Hello, this is the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today, we're going to do our normal walk through the top 10 of the box office for the weekend of March 23rd to the 25th, which is today. We'll talk about the new movies that came out. A lot of new movies, not a lot of big movies came out. A lot of smaller, mid-tier movies came out. So we'll go in depth a little bit on those. And then we'll walk through what's coming out over the next couple of weeks and see what April's going to be about, and also talk a little bit about the Easter holiday as well. Okay, so let's dive right into this. So number one this weekend was Pacific Rim Uprising from Universal this time. The original was from Warner Brothers. Came in at $28 million, which was higher than what we were thinking coming into the weekend. We were thinking more like 23, 25 for the weekend. Which, great, it made 28. It did better than what we were thinking. The movie still cost $150 million to make. No one has any idea who greenlit this sequel. It makes zero sense when you think about the original Pacific Rim, which came out in July of 2013. That movie was a very strange film. Guillermo del Toro directed it. It was supposed to be this real massive popcorn blockbuster movie. It cost $190 million to make. It opened at 37 and closed out at 101. Worldwide total for the original Pacific Rim was, I think, just about $400 million bucks, a little bit over that. A pretty significant flop, which was why it was really surprising when this sequel was greenlit. And you kind of have to wonder, like, maybe Warner Brothers eked out breaking even on Pacific Rim. I don't really see how they did that, but maybe they did. Universal takes over, greenlights the sequel, doesn't have Guillermo del Toro, switches out the main lead, and you're just like, who thought this was a great idea? I mean, it doesn't add up to me why you would make this film. And opening at 28's terrible. This sequel cost $150 to make. At best, it's going to do $85 million domestically. Internationally, the best case scenario is like $340 million bucks. I don't see how this is going to break even. So you have two Pacific Rim movies that have come out. Both have underperformed. Let's just hope they put it to bed and say this thing is over. Like, the quality of the sequel's not great. 46% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score gave it a 57, which is sort of suspect because it's Rotten Tomatoes. At least the audience score side. The critic side is pretty sound score, I should say. Probably even more damning is the cinema score of a B. So the people who went to go see it Friday night, 7 o'clock is usually when they pull it all across the country. They gave it a B. That's not good for a movie like this. It needs at least a B plus, A minus to get, I think, a 3x multiplier. So that's not going to happen. So it's just another flop here for Pacific Rim. I don't see the logic in making this sequel. Maybe it was a studio thing where they handed the baton off to Universal and said, we can do it better. They didn't. And this is the result. Another flop for the Pacific Rim series. And I hope it ends. I don't see any reason ever to make another one of these movies. Maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, they want to reboot the whole thing. It's cool. It's crazy because the idea and concept of it is pretty cool. And the original Pacific Rim is super weird, not gonna lie. Really odd blockbuster. It's Guillermo del Toro. If you've seen Shape of Water, which won Best Picture, he won Best Director. Very strange movie. Definitely not for mass appeal. And you can just tell that when you're watching Pacific Rim. It's like, this is an auteur who is like boxed in to make this popcorn movie. He thought it probably got a good payday. He thought it was going to be exciting. I can get my work out to a lot of people. But the end result was a super obtuse, strange film, which did not connect with a lot of people. But, I don't know. I thought the concept of the movie and certain aspects of it were great. It felt like no reason to spend $190 million on it. That makes zero sense. And certainly no reason at all to make a sequel. And maybe Universal is learning the lesson now that Warner Brothers learned 5 years ago. Okay, so Pacific Uprising, not a great opening, despite the fact that it beat projections. $28 million is not good enough to break even for this film. So I don't see them ever doing another one of these films. And Universal is just stupid to make a sequel on that movie. Okay, anyway, a more important film and a more interesting film. Black Panther came in at number 2, $16.6 million, 37% drop. Lost about 460 theaters. Per theater average was just about $5,000. Black Panther's total right now is $630 million domestically, which is just like, whoa. Like, that's insane. It has now passed The Last Jedi, right? Black Panther's passed The Last Jedi domestically. It has also passed The Avengers. And so you just take a big step back and like, what is going on with this? And I've talked about this film at length over the last few podcasts. It's probably been my favorite topic this year by far. And I'm clearly, if you listen to the podcast, I am not an MCU fanboy. I am not even really a big comic book movie fan, to be honest with you. I like some of them. I don't like most of them. But there's something about the box office performance with this one that is just so outlandish and abnormal to me. Black Panther is at basically $631 million in its 38th day of release. At this same point in time, Last Jedi was at 604, so it blew past that. Avengers was only at 572 at this point, so obviously Black Panther has just lapped that and then some. And it's also ahead of, pretty significantly ahead of by about $20 million, Jurassic World. So now Black Panther has just launched in the top 5 all-time domestic box office. And the question is, does it have a chance to take down number 3 and number 4? Number 4, as I mentioned, it was Jurassic World at 652 total domestically. I see no reason why it doesn't take down Jurassic World and become number 4. And only $7 million ahead on top of Jurassic World is Titanic at 659. Based on the drops that I'm seeing, and this thing has dropped sub 40% the last 4 weekends. I don't know, it feels like Jurassic World's almost a given at this point, and I don't really see any reason to think that it's not going to pass Titanic and become the number 3rd all-time domestic box office. Avatar's at 760. That's out of reach, I would say. And obviously Star Wars Force Awakens is at $936 million overall. So 1 and 2 are not in jeopardy, but definitely 4 is going to fall, and I think Titanic and number 3 is going to fall to Black Panther. So an amazing achievement for this film. And I think, I talked a lot over the last few weeks about its opening and how well it's doing on the front end. But these performances on the back end with these sub 40% drops, it just, people must be seeing it over and over again. So a lot of repeat business. It's just when it's not losing over 40% or 45% each week with a huge blockbuster like this, it suggests to me that people are choosing to spend their limited funds on seeing Black Panther. They only see 4 to 5 movies a year, the average American and Canadian in the domestic market. They're choosing Black Panther and maybe even choosing it twice. So it suggests to me, and sort of reading this and sort of taking a wide angle view of Black Panther and its performance, there's some clear conclusions that you can make. MCU now is rooted in Black Panther. That's going to be the future of MCU. Black Panther is going to be an integral part of that, maybe even the center of it, like Iron Man was for the first part of MCU. You'd be stupid not to. Like, if a movie is in top 3 domestic all time, there's something about it that people loved. So there's a good reason to build that cinematic universe around that character now, which was not at all the expectation going in to Black Panther opening at all. So that's pretty much a given now, integral part of MCU now moving forward. In terms of blockbusters and popcorn movies in general, I think we'll see a lot more movies that are directed by African Americans. This is the best performing film by an African American director ever. So that's going to change the industry significantly, I think. But more so on a higher level than that, just how the box office functions and why people go to see movies and what they spend their money on, and the movie industry in general. I think Black Panther does demonstrate that the box office has become extremely top heavy. And what I mean by that is we're running about even to last year, and last year had a really good winter, spring, and Black Panther has lifted up the box office to that same level this year. What I'm seeing, though, is that there's a little bit of rot at the lower tier small budget films and mid-tier budget films. Black Panther has overperformed so much that it has helped us break even, but I'm seeing pretty significant losses in the smaller films. And I think this has been a fear, at least from box office, not necessarily a fear, but just sort of like something that has been on the tip of a lot of people's tongues since probably the mid-90s when I started following the box office, is that the movie industry and the movie theater industry, there's always this chance that popcorn blockbuster films are going to completely take over. And I think it's more of a fear coming from the artistic side, the director side, writer side. I feel like that fear is now coming to fruition, where, and I talked a little bit about this last year on the podcast off and on, but the performance of Black Panther really solidifies it to me. The big movies, the popcorn movies coming up, like Avengers, Deadpool 2, Han Solo, maybe, Jurassic World Dose, those movies are going to not just dominate the box office, but they're going to completely control the business to the point where small films that are made for under 50 million bucks and on down are going to get completely pushed out. Now, there's obviously exceptions to this rule right now. Look at anything that Blumhouse has done over the last 5-6 years. They have really figured out the micro budget formula. Give a director $5 million so you don't get a cent more, and we're going to make it into a $50 million box office smash. Like Happy Death Day would be a good example of this recently. They're going to continue to do that because they just have the formula down. They get it. Everybody else in that space, in the sub 50 million space, it's tough, right? Like, and I don't see how that part of the business is really going to last in at the box office. And I think, it's kind of crazy hearing this for the last 20 years at least, that all popcorn movies are going to ruin the movie industry. Blockbusters are going to completely take over. And every year there's always, it gets brushed off. It's not going to happen. No. There's all these small films that are doing well. Comedies are doing all that kind of stuff. That's just no longer the case. And Black Panther's performance really crystallized that for me. It's going to be top 3 all time domestically. People are spending their limited funds on seeing movies like Black Panther, sometimes multiple times. There's at least 4 or 5 other massive blockbusters that the general population is going to want to see this year. So, what about the rest of the movies? And I get the feeling that, on the one hand, if you're thinking about just like adult dramas, rated R comedies, stuff like that, in that middle ground, maybe not micro budget like sub 5 million, but not above 50 million bucks. Right in that middle ground, they're going to hit from two sides because all the people, everybody, the general population are spending their cash and their limited funds on the massive movies like this and Star Wars and Jurassic World, stuff like that. And on the other side, you have the streaming services, the over-the-top services like Netflix, HBO, Amazon, Hulu, all that sort of stuff. And they're like growing by the day now, these SVOD services, subscription video on demand services. They're encroaching from the other side saying, hey, we want you on our service. Why don't you launch your film on our service? Think of something like Cloverfield Paradox and stuff like that. And so these mid-tier films, it's going to become, and art films for that matter, it's going to get to the point where it's not going to make any more sense to release smaller films in theaters. And that will just increase the dominance of these popcorn movies. And I think I think Black Panther is kind of the canary in the coal mine for that. Just because, I think obviously the movie's great. Really high quality film. People loved it. But there's nothing really to indicate to me why it would perform as good as the Avengers or as good as Jurassic World. What I'm seeing is that it was a big movie that like ballooned up over the last 3 weeks before its release, and its performance since then just solidifies this for me. People want to spend their money at the movie theater on big films. They don't want to spend it on anything small. They don't want to spend it on comedies. They don't want to spend it on indie flicks like that. I think is all going to move to streaming and the internet. And this is something that, has been happening for the last decade at least. But now I think it's into hyperdrive now. And we'll see where we end up at the end of the year in terms of box office. I don't know if it's going to hurt the box office overall because people might just, spend their money on the bigger films instead of the smaller films. But my guess is that it's going to hurt the box office overall. We'll see how the year ends up. But that's just the reading that I get. And I think Black Panther's performance really speaks to that shift in the power dynamic at the box office, where it has become super top heavy, giving the popcorn big studios more power and more revenue. And I think the smaller studios are some of them are squeaking by, like A24, Bleecker Street, Blumhouse, of course. But I think it's going to push out a lot of the smaller players to the box office, and they're just going to start launching their films straight to streaming. But whatever. Black Panther's doing amazing, fantastic. That's the real headline story here. Beating the Avengers, top 5 all time. Looks like it's going to end up number 3 all time domestically. And who knows? Maybe Avengers Infinity beats it like in a couple of months. But truly a fantastic historic performance for that film. Let's keep going. Number 3 for this weekend was I Can Only Imagine from Roadside Attractions. This is a Christian film. Performing very, very well. $7 million budget. It did $14 million this weekend. A phenomenal 19% drop. Added 600 theaters. That's when you know it's doing fantastic. Per theater average was $6,142. Total take so far is $38 million. But it's kind of an interesting story. Like Roadside Attractions puts out to lots of different types of films. They're not really known for Christian films necessarily. But this one is just, I don't know what happened. It's got Dennis Quaid in it. He's in like every Christian film now. PG movie. It's coming out around Easter now. It's a music film too, but I don't really know that much about the movie, but I know it is based in music. And so maybe like a Christian rock artist, something like that. In any event, so it's doing very well. Kind of proves that if you can make a good movie, even if it is just focused on the Christian audience, can make a lot of cash. And I think a lot of times A+ cinema score, I'll just throw that out there. That does not happen very often, maybe a few times a year. So the Christian audiences who went to go see this absolutely loved it. And that's why it only dropped 19% in its second weekend. I think it's going to continue with those low drops. Where does it end up? I have no idea. What did it open to? I got to double check. I can't do math in my head anymore. I'm too old. $17 million opening, $13 million this weekend. Who knows? Like 17, at least probably a 4X. You're looking at like $70 million, I think, for this film. It's going to play really well through Easter too, because it's a family movie. This kind of goes to show you that I think oftentimes Christian films and Christian-centric films get put to a side in sort of this ghetto of the box office just because they don't pull in a ton of cash. Every once in a while you have a Passion of Christ, which is a huge worldwide phenomenon, but they tend to not do very well, but they do well enough where they keep making them. And there's a little bit of profit. This is definitely a breakout from that ghetto. I can only imagine, at least well over $50 million, probably in the almost $70 million total for that one, maybe even higher, depending if it keeps dropping like that. But it kind of proves that, there is a space for Christian films in sort of the mass audience of the box office. So that's a great performance. We'll keep it on that one. Probably will play really well Easter weekend, which is the upcoming weekend here. Number 4 this weekend was Sherlock Gnomes. $10.6 million. really low per theater average for this, sub 3,000 at about $2,900 per theater. Not a great performance at all for this movie. I don't know what happened with this one. I think it just conceptually just didn't really make a lot of sense. Seemed really stupid. There's no real tie-in with like a video game or anything like that to get people in the seats. Budget was $59 million. That being said, really depressed opening. I don't see it dropping that much next weekend. Probably sub 30% drop, I would say. So it might hang in there for a while. Might do okay at home video. I just don't see it making much, if any, of a profit. I think it's going to be a loss for Paramount, who literally cannot catch a break. Someone needs to buy them, or Paramount needs to get shut down, because they cannot. They're dysfunctional. Like, they just do not know how to market and make good films anymore, or successful films, I should say. Okay, so that's Sherlock Gnomes, not a good performance. Number 5 was Tomb Raider, from Warner Brothers, the reboot. $10.4 million for the weekend. A not great 56% drop. Held on to all its theaters, still in about $3,850. Per theater average, not good, $2,700 in its second weekend. Total take so far for Tomb Raider is almost $42 million. Its budget was $94 million. Maybe this one gets saved by the international audiences. I kind of doubt it, though. Another mistake, I think, from Warner Brothers. They thought they could bring in a new star, Alicia Vikander, but it did not work. Internationally, it's doing okay, 170 international so far, so worldwide take is 211. I think it's doing decently well in China. It made about $41 million in China. That's its biggest foreign market. Everywhere else, it's kind of in the low millions. Russia did okay, 4 million. As well as in South Korea, about 4 million. I don't think the international is going to save this. I don't see a sequel coming. Disappointment, middling performance. Not necessarily a flop, but definitely an underperformance overall. Speaking of underperformances, number 6, A Wrinkle in Time from Disney. $8 million, a 50% drop, which is way too high for a children's film in its third week. Lost about 550 theaters. Per theater average is $2,300, which is not very healthy. Wrinkle in Time just did not perform well, and I think it was a quality problem, like I mentioned last week. It just wasn't put together well. Although they greenlit or signed on the director for the DC Gods film, which I mentioned last week. I thought was really odd timing. Ava DuVernay, I think that's how you pronounce it. Was that French? So she gets signed up for a big DCU film. It's sort of like, ooh, like, I don't know, like, why would you do that now? She did Selma, she did Middle of Nowhere. She's obviously a very good filmmaker, might be better on the artistic side of things than she is on the big budget stuff. So we'll see how that does. It won't come out for like probably 4 or 5 years. But Wrinkle in Time is definitely an underperformance. Floppage territory? Yeah, probably not, but definitely underperformance like Tomb Raider. Number 7 was Love, Simon from Fox. This one's doing very well. 7.8 million, 33% drop, which is great. Added about 32 theaters this weekend. Per theater average was $3,200. Low production budget on this one, only 17 million. It's taken in about 24 million bucks so far. This one's performed a lot better than I had anticipated that it would. I think it is really connecting well with the LGBTQ crowd. I know that Neil Patrick Harris was pushing this film pretty hard. Kristen Bell, I think, too. There's a story about how they were buying out theaters just so people could see it. I feel like this one's just gonna play well in the long run and have really good legs. I don't know if it I don't know where it's gonna go though. Like overall, 30% drop is great, but it's not like 19% like the Christians did for I Can Only Imagine. I think a good performance here is anything over 40 million bucks, which I think it should be able to get to. Speaking of the Christian crowd, number 8, Paul Apostle of Christ from Sony. $5 million on its opening weekends. Only opened in about 1,400 theaters. I'm sure they'll add some more for the Easter weekend. $3,400 per theater. The production budget was really small in this, only $5 million, so it's pretty much like a micro budget film at this stage. No one really wanted to see this one that much. Probably a lot of the audience went to go see I Can Only Imagine instead because it's such a high quality film. At least from what the people said. or the viewers said. I don't see a cinema score for this one. Probably not big enough for release yet, because cinema score doesn't do everything. 35% Rotten Tomatoes, so the critics absolutely hated it. 91% audience score. I can't take that seriously. Rotten Tomatoes. This one's going nowhere. Maybe like a sub 20% drop next weekend, probably sub 30. But it's really not going to make that much money in the long run. Number 9 was Game Night, rated R comedy, 4.1 million. Great 25% drop. Let's take a look at these drops real quick, because this is something I mentioned when it opened up. Because of the high quality in terms of its Rotten Tomato score, I think it was in the 80s. Audience score was pretty high too. I suggested that its drops would be low. First weekend drop was 38%. Second weekend drop was 25%. Then 29%. Then 26% this weekend. So those are great drops for rated R comedy. Usually comedies are a little bit more front loaded, like horror movies. So the quality's playing pretty well here. That bodes very well for home entertainment. So once it hits VOD, DVD, and all that fun stuff, I think it's going to do pretty well. Production budget was a little bit on the higher side, $37 million for a comedy like this, but it wasn't like Baywatch, which was like a massive budget film. Total take so far is $60 million. It's going to continue to take in like, I don't know, $3 million bucks next weekend, kind of like add on to that. So probably looking like breaking 70 in the mid 70s. Not a bad performance. You know, when I saw it opening weekend, I was like underperformance. Now it's kind of like right on target, even edging into a good performance for Game Night. Maybe a glimmer of hope for rated R comedies. We'll see. Number 10 was Midnight Sun, Open Road Films. What a joke. Patrick Schwarzenegger. Yes, Arnold's son is the star of this. Also Bella Thorne, who I know the name. I just can't remember what she's originally from. She was in Boo Medea Halloween. What? Is she like a TV star? She must be a TV star, because I don't remember any of these films. She was in The Duff. I don't remember that movie either. But her name sounds so familiar. I must be missing a whole part of her career. Midnight Sun, not a great performance. Open Road Films got bought out by a Chinese company, I think. It used to be owned by like AMC and Regal, I think. They started it to produce straight to VOD films, but then they pivoted and started to put out movies in theaters, but never really took very well. Midnight Sun is another example of that. $4 million bucks opening weekend. What I'm really looking at is that per theater average sub 2,000 opening weekend, which is just a total floppage. Obviously the production budget wasn't very high, but it doesn't change the fact that nobody wanted to go see this movie. Speaking of movies that people didn't want to see, number 11, so we're outside the top 10. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on there. Unsane from Steven Soderbergh, who put this out with Bleecker Street. This movie was shot all on iPhone 7, did $3.8 million its opening weekend, 2,000 theaters, per theater average, just about where Midnight Sun was at $1,900. I'll talk a little bit about this film just because I think it's fascinating for a few reasons. One, Soderbergh is always experimenting with the business. It's something he's done since the start of his career. Obviously, he got his break from Sex, Lies, and Videotapes back in Sundance. What was that, like 92, 91? Sometime back then. And has constantly tried to push the envelope in the industry and try and do different things. His last big movie, sort of big release from a studio, I think it was also Bleecker Street, actually. It was Logan Lucky last August. And there's a really good in-depth article about his thought process with this film. And one of the things he decided to do with that, along with Bleecker Street, was, hey, let's not do a normal marketing budget, which for a wide release film is well over $15 million just in the domestic market, to market a wide release worldwide, well over $100 million bucks just in marketing costs. Think about that. I mean, it's nuts. So with Logan Lucky, he was like, let's not do that. Let's just market. Let's focus our marketing on very specific demographics. For that movie, it was like NASCAR towns. So a lot of like West Virginia, North Carolina, where I live in Tennessee. They did a lot of targeted marketing in those areas. And then as well, focused a lot on social media, and didn't start until 3 weeks before Logan Lucky was released. It was a big experiment, and it failed. It just didn't work very well. People were aware of the movie, but they didn't push it hard enough over the earlier summer, because it opened in August. And by the time it came out, people just weren't that hyped. There was no hype for that movie. And so his little experiment didn't work. And Unsane is also an experiment, obviously, in terms of the production of it, doing it on iPhone 7 was kind of a bet that didn't really pay off, because if you read the reviews from people, they say it looks really cheap and kind of shoddy. And then also on top of that production experiment, he did another marketing experiment, which was basically like, I'm not going to market this thing at all. I don't think he marketed it, or Bleecker Street marketed it, until about a week before release. I had heard about it months ago and was like, man, where's the trailer for this? Is this thing going to drop? What's going on? Totally forgot about it. And then about a week ago, they're like, oh yeah, this Steven Soderbergh horror movie is coming out. I was like, what the F? Like, how did you not market? No one had any idea this movie was coming out. And I think it's unfortunate. The quality of the movie seems like it's okay. 78% Rotten Tomatoes, probably the best, outside of Isle of Dogs, which I'll get to in a bit, the best reviewed film, new wide release this weekend. Audience score was 61 on Rotten Tomatoes, B- on CinemaScore, which is terrible. Horror films kind of get voted a little bit lower than normal on CinemaScore, but that's still awful. Anything below a straight B is just a wreck. So Unsane, the critics liked it, didn't connect with the audiences very well, or maybe the right people didn't go see it. That's also one thing I question with that CinemaScore. It only surveys the people go see it Friday night, so it's like maybe those weren't the right people to see that film. In any event, another experiment kind of failed with him, and like, he likes to do different things, and he's definitely an auteur when it comes to TV production and film production. He does not want to follow any rules. But with a movie like this, why would you release this film? It makes zero sense. Put it up on Netflix. People will actually watch it. You probably sell it to them for like $10 million, something like that. Would have been a better release for this. They can market it, or Amazon Prime, or Hulu, or hell, even like Shudder. Like, this would have been a great marketing campaign for Shudder to get more, and that's a SVOD, streaming video on demand service, just for horror films. I am a member. I love it. It would have been a great marketing campaign for them to grow their subscription base. As of right now, this is a complete waste of time. Like, should have never been in theaters. It makes zero sense, and it performed just like I thought it would. And keep in mind that, like, okay, $3.8 billion, well, if it was shot for like nothing, isn't that good? No, it's not good, because $3.8 million is not going to the pocket of Bleecker Street or Steven Soderbergh. They're at most going to make not even, let's see, 1.6 million off of that, maybe. They're not going to break even on this, even when you get home entertainment involved. I don't know what they're thinking. It was an experiment, and it just didn't go well, I think is what it can come down to. Same thing with Logan Lucky last year. He's trying new things, which I respect. I just wish, he's a super smart guy who makes amazing films, who has made some real classics in the past. He's one of the best working directors out there. I just wish he's done this before, where he goes on these experimental kicks and wants to, break every rule of the box office. I wish he would be a traditionalist, like maybe 20% of the time, instead of always trying to be an iconoclast, because it doesn't work out for his films very well. In any event, that's my little Steven Soderbergh rant for now. The other movie I want to talk about in terms of new release is Isle of Dogs, the new Wes Anderson film. Opened in 27 theaters, which is kind of high for a limited art house release like this. I don't know why they're doing a limited release for this film. I feel like it's a mass release film. They certainly marketed the film like it was a mass wide release. It's not going to go wide till the middle of April, it sounds like. I feel like this would have been great for the Easter weekend wide release. I don't know. But Fox Searchlight decided not to do that. Although they're not opening it in just New York and Los Angeles, which I also question. It's like, if you're going to do a limited release on a handful of screens, do it in New York and Los Angeles. get that massive per theater number, which will give it great press when it's opening. You know, if this thing had broken 100K per theater, oh my God, they'd be gushing about it left and right. This is going to be a huge hit, blah, blah, blah. It did $58,000 per theater this weekend on 27 screens, which is great, which is fantastic. But there's nothing that I can point to right now that's going to suggest it's going to be a breakout hit. Because if it was on 4 theaters and did 100K, that's a press hit right there. It's like, oh, amazing. If you opened it wider and it did okay, that's also another thing. I don't see this weird 27 screen opening being playing to any advantage, because all they did was depress their per theater average, which is the only thing that was going to get a press. Now it really doesn't have a lot of press. That's sort of my neurotic viewpoint on that. 93% on Rotten Tomatoes for Isle of Dogs. Audience score is at 88%. We get a cinema score yet for this one? We don't, because it's not wide yet. I have no idea how this is going to play out. I love Wes Anderson. He's probably my favorite living director. I love pretty much everything he does. I'm super critical of his bad movies like Darjeeling Limited, Fantastic Fox. I did not like that much, although I saw it 4 times in the theater. I have no idea if there is a bigger audience for Isle of Dogs. I think that there is. And we'll see. It's going to expand, I think, 100 more theaters next weekend. And then I think by mid-April, it will be at wide release. We'll check on the release schedule here in a bit. So I don't know. We'll see how that one does overall. I have high hopes for it. I love his films. It looks really quirky and weird, per usual, with Wes Anderson. I wonder how hipsters now, or millennial hipsters, they really gravitated towards Wes Anderson, and now they're old enough where a lot of them have kids. Like, a lot of my friends have kids that are like 4 or 5 in that age range. I wonder if this is a movie they're gonna take their kids to. It's gonna be like kind of like a family film. Is it listed as a family film? It's listed as animation, which counts, I guess. PG-13 though, so maybe not for all the kids. Okay, enough on Wes Anderson and Isle of Dogs. We'll see how that one does next weekend when it expands. To close out the show, let's talk about what's going to happen over the next few weeks. Big opening this weekend, massive opening, or this week I should say. Ready Player One is coming out. It's listed as Wednesday the 28th, but I think it's going to come out on Thursday. I'm not sure if previews are going to be on this Wednesday. I have no idea what this movie is going to do. Not really interested to check out tracking on it. I love Steven Spielberg. This movie has a chance to really break out and be a big hit. I just don't know if audiences are going to show up. This is kind of like talking back to the Black Panther thing. They spent their money on Black Panther, right? Maybe even they saw it twice. Are they going to spend money to go see this movie from kind of an unproven IP? People love the book and stuff, but it's not like the bestseller ever. Do they even know about the book? We'll see. People are thinking like 50s, I think, 50s, 60s for opening. Legs that to $180 million total domestically. That seems like a decent performance for this. I don't know if we have the production budget listed here. No, probably $200 million or something like that. My gut says it's gonna do about that. I think it's gonna do okay. I don't see it massively breaking out and going to like $80-90 million opening weekend. It's possible. I just my gut doesn't feel it right now. I also don't see it super flopping and doing like $30 million opening weekend. So I think it's gonna be right in the sort of target range for its tracking. Also this Easter weekend we have Tyler Perry's new one, and then God's Not Dead as well. I don't see either of those movies doing that well. God's Not Dead is obviously a Christian film. Anything else limited coming out? Caught? Does anybody know what this movie is? Sci-fi horror coming out on 10 screens. I don't know what that is. I don't see an expansion listed here for Isle of Dogs, but I thought they were going to do about 100 this weekend. Then we're into April. We get into Blockers, which I think is going to do okay. Rated R comedy with Leslie Mann and John Cena. Originally called something else. I'll let you guess what that was. We'll see how that one does. Game Night did very well. I have questions about the quality of Blockers. It doesn't look fantastic. But maybe it does all right. A Quiet Place is a movie to watch, or at least focus on its performance. Comes out from Paramount. Maybe Paramount's going to have a hit here. Really strong trailer. Horror thrill movie. I got John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, husband and wife. Amazing trailer. I feel a ton of hype for that film. Like a ton. I don't know if it's like $30 million hype or $50 million hype. But I feel like I'm really excited to see how that one does. Chappaquiddick is a waste of time. I don't know why they're putting it out. It's just like far right propaganda against Ted Kennedy, or Democrats in general. They hate liberals. We get it. Get over it. Lean on Pete looks pretty good, coming out from A24, but art house film. Then as we get deeper into April, Borg versus McIntyre from Neon. I have no idea what that's going to do. Neon's an art house film distributor, so I don't see it doing 4,000 screens on opening. Maybe it plays like I, Tonya, does like mid-20s, 30s overall. Big one on the April 13th weekend is going to be Rampage, which I think is gonna open pretty good. I think over 50, I would guess. Truth or Dare from Universal, I believe that is a horror film. Doesn't look great. PG-13 horror film. What a joke. April 13th is when Isle of the Dogs does go nationwide. I don't know if that's like 2,000 or 3,000, but it does go wide then. Deeper into April 20th, Super Troopers 2, of course, is opening on 420. Traffic from Lionsgate. Don't know that one very well. That's not going to do anything. I Feel Pretty from SDX. Who is in this? Amy Schumer, Michelle Williams, Emily Ratajkowski. I've not seen a trailer for that one. Also PG-13. Man, April's kind of like, you got like Rampage and some art films. I think Quiet Place is going to be a big one to watch, but like everything's kind of pales in comparison to Avengers Infinity War, which opens the end of the month. And then we're really getting into the summer season with May. I think the big ones to look for over the next month are definitely going to be Quiet Place, Ready Player One, Rampage, and then Avengers. Those are the big ones that we're probably going to focus on. In any event, that's what's coming out over the next month or so. That's all I have for today, guys. Thanks for listening. If you can, subscribe on YouTube. That's the one I watch the most. And if you have a comment, just leave a comment there. I will respond. But thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.